Hello, hello, hello. Welcome, welcome, welcome. My name is Kevin Owasu Itoe, and welcome to Teach Yourself Test Automation. I'm teaching myself Cypress, right? Cypress, another web automation tool, right? So automating web applications with Cypress, right? And I'm teaching myself, and I'm coming up with this, making these videos, a body of knowledge out there, or a knowledge base, so that when you come across it, if it helps you, then and I've done my job, right? So thumbs up as well if you find value from this, and also like and comment, and also share the video and subscribe, hit the notification bell to get a video when next I release, right? And also I am doing a personal development drive over in Medium. That's a personal career development and personal stroke professional development drive, right? I'll put a link down below and you can check that out, right? But here we are doing yesterday, or the video before, it was a static drop down. So we are looking at how to select an option from a dynamic drop down today, right? So without further ado, let's dive in, right? I've chatted too much, right? So if we go to our Visual Studio Code, and right, this was what we did yesterday, right, on the last video. So static drop down. I'll just copy what we have here. Oh good. So this is what gives you, this is the code that gives you the intelligent code completion, right? Intelligent code completion. So I will copy from here. Normally you should just be, we did this framework, which is your mock-up framework for Cypress from scratch, right? Normally you should try and practice doing that over and over, so you know how to do the framework, right? So it's just a describe framework and an et framework that wrap so the describe function or framework wraps your test, it contains your test cases, right? So it's your test suite, and your your it function, which is your it framework, now that wraps around your test cases, right? So that's your test cases, right? Right, so we've copied that. All we want to do now is create another file, and we're going to name this dynamic drop down, right? OS.js, right? OS.js. So we go in here, it should be empty now, and we just drop our code that we copied in there, right? So we have our intelligence code completion piece of code in there, intelligence code completion, right? Or IntelliSense. In Cypress, you say IntelliSense. Yeah, that's just when you access your, like so, right? When you access your, let me take myself out of there again, right? Come on. When you access the Cypress APIs, right? This is what happens. You say CY, so you're accessing the Cypress APIs, and you say dot. That's what's called the IntelliSense code completion, right? It gives you the methods that you can choose from. You just go get, right? So that's what we call IntelliSense code completion, right? So what we do is trying to do is we are going in here, right? We're going to type SAI, right? And then you're going to see some options that come up. Now you cannot, obviously you cannot, like, you could select those options like that, but we want to be able to just type, right, and select one of this, right? Select one of this, and you see when I do it, right, there's two ways you could actually do this. Well, we'll do it, right? So why is this a dynamic drop down? Dynamic drop down is just that you have to, suggestions come up once you start typing, right? Once you start typing, there's a suggestion of lists that you can choose from, right? And that list changes, right? London, let's see if there's anything from London. Yeah, well, it's using the L, D, L, O, and N. Yeah, yeah. So that's why it's dynamic, right? It's a random suggestion. I mean, your text determines the drop down. Yeah, so that's why it's a dynamic, right? So we will come in here and we're going to type in SAI, and then we're going to select, we can select any of this, but we'll go for St. because I like the name St. Lucia, right? The other ones are a bit too long. Right? So what do we do? First of all, we want to locate this drop down, this dynamic box, right? So if we inspect, it's a bit slow. If we inspect that, hopefully we get a CSI. I mean, yeah, or class CSS, or CSI, CSS, right? So this is our, yep. If we take this up a little bit and then hover over here, you see that that's highlighted, right? That field is highlighted. So in here, we want to, maybe we go with the ID, right? We go with the ID. So we copy the ID, go back to our Visual Studio Code, and all we want to say is, remember, we're just getting, we want to locate that that drop down field, right? So we just say get, open and close brackets, open and close quotations, and in here we want to say hashtag, right? Because we are converting that ID to a CSS ID, right, for Cypress, right? And that's also located that particular field. And what we want to do now is dot. What do we want to do inside? We want to type SI and SAI and select our St. Lucia, right? So I'll copy this, and go back here, yeah, and say dot type, right? Type is also a function, right? And then you just say open and close brackets and open and close single quotations, and what I want to type is that, right? So that's it, right? We've located that box, we've typed stuff in that box, and now we're going to get our suggestions, right? We're going to get our suggestions, right? So we get our suggestions. Now if we want to go to the HTML code, right? If we go to the HTML code, get our suggestions. Let's inspect that again, right? And hover, we want to find our suggestions, right? So I think we need to be making sure that this is, and then, okay, let's see. Inspect one of this, see where it takes us. Yeah, I think we're in the right, area. So, SI, right, okay, right. See, once I hover over here, or once I hover over here, right, see, it gets highlighted, right? It gets highlighted. So we want to first of all select the array of options, right? So we want to select all of this, right? So if I hover over here, that's what selects all our options from the drop down, right? So what do we select? What do we take from here? So we've got an ID, right? So we can use the ID, right? So the ID will select all these options. Let's go back here, right? And go back here, right? So the ID is ID for that HTML a line of selects all our options from after typing that, right? So we head back to our Visual Studio Code, and what we want to say, we want to get the array of elements, right? So dot get, right? Open and close brackets as well. So that was an ID. So we say hashtag, and we drop our ID in there, right? So now we have got all of this. We've got all our options. So let's go back again. I'll show you again. We've got all our options. Yeah. So what do we do now, right? So from now we've narrowed the search down to just the drop down after typing SAI, right? We've narrowed our search just to those three, right? Now within those three, we want to identify the one we want to select, right? So how do we do that? So if we go down to the one that I want to select, you highlight the HTML code here and you highlight it up there. So St. Lucia. If we go into St. Lucia, right? So we go down to St. Lucia, right? And then there's an ID in here as well. See? So that's still, if I go back here, so that's highlighted. And if I go down, go into the HTML, we've got an ID here, right? we got an ID here, or we got a class, right? So let's go for the ID, right? So if we select that ID, this is called parent-child chaining as well, right? So you've identified the parent, right? So let me do that again, right? So we've identified the parent, right? And the parent is the code that holds all the children, right? These are the children, right? And now we are traversing. In Selenium, you say traversing, but here you say you're chaining, right? So and what we want to use is like since we've allocated all of this array, right? Inside that array, we can use a method called find, right? We can use a method called find. So if we go back into our Visual Studio Code and we say dot find. So from the array, find me one, right? So we go in here and then we say, right? We don't want to use double quotation mark. We want to use singles, right? And what do we want to find, right? What do we want to find? We want to find a what did we say we're going to use? We're going to use a ID. Are we going to use ID? Here we use ID. Find me this child using this ID, right? So the ID is hashtag, right? Hashtag. Hashtag. Drop the ID there, right? Now we have found that element. What do we want to do, right? What do we want to do? We want to make sure that we are selecting the right one as well, right? We want to make sure we're selecting the right one. If you look, I think if we do that, it might still work. But what we should really do to follow the correct code practice is actually right? So we want to use a class, right? We want to use a class. So we don't go down into the subdev. We want to use a class, right? But yeah, we want to use a class, right? So instead of the ID, we want to use a class because we are traversing to the child, not to the grandchild, right? As you do in Selenium, right? So go back in here and we want to change this into a CSS, right? A class CSS, right? And if you look at the website now, right, all our elements on that dropdown have the same class, right? So if we hover over this, let's bring that back up, right? Bring that back up. And if we hover over this, right, all of them have the same class, the same class name, right? They all have the same class name. So if they all have the same class name, right, what do we use, right? So we have 3 elements there with the same class name, right? We've got 3 elements up here with the same class name, right? So we're going to use what's called indexation, right? Indexation, right? So index always starts from 0. So St. Kitts and Nevis or whatever it will be 0, and St. Lucia will be 1, right? So that's what we want to do. Hopefully you're following this because I'm confusing myself here, but you can watch it over and over again, right? So after you've selected our parent and we've gone down to our child and we've realized that our class name CSS selector for our child has got 3 the 3 selections have got the same class name. You could use indexation, and indexation is .eq. That's indexation, and all you do is open and close brackets. And I've told you indexation starts from 0, 1, 2. We have 3 options in our drop down. So the first one will be a 0, St. Lucia will be a 1, right? And now we've selected St. Lucia, right, with using our indexation. What do we want to do, right? We want to make sure we've selected the correct one, which is St. Lucia, right? Again, now we can use a method called contains, right? Contains, right? And all you do here is contains is a string. All you do is open and close brackets. Again, we don't want to be using a mixture of that. And then in here, we just want to say St. Lucia, right? Contains. Let's go and see if the actual word is St. Lucia, right? let's inspect our code, right? Go in here. We have to go into the chat. That's St. Kitts. See, we're looking at St. Kitts. Right, yeah, the actual text is St. Lucia, right? So you just compare the text, right? Go back to our, and in here, we want to say St. Lucia. So now that checks that we've selected the right option from the drop down, right? And all we want to do now is dot click, right? Dot click, right? And if we save this and head over to save as, why did I do save as? It's trying to do something. I've not used save as before, so let me come out of that. Let's say save, right? And go to our test runner. And from our test runner, we want to run our dynamic dropdown, right? We want to run our dynamic dropdown. And hopefully this works, right? And we will talk through it again, right? We'll talk through it again. This is a bit of a long-winded, dynamic dropdown, so a little bit tricky to do. Right? It's just the website. Yep. So it's found at 3, right? And right, did it click? See, it's selected our St. Lucia, right? It selected our St. Lucia, and it clicked on it, right? So that's it, St. Lucia, right? It selected it, right? So we traveled to the website. We got our drop-down field. We typed in SAI, right? We used our CSS selector ID to find to actually get the group of the options of the drop down, and then we use the find method to actually look for our the one we're interested in, right? We used a find to actually locate what we're interested in from that array, right? And that array, we used a class, CSS class for the array, right? So we brought the whole array, and then we said from that array of 3 options, use indexation and select the second one, which is in indexation as the first, right? Because indexation starts from 0. So from all the 3 options, you see there's a 3 just beside there. So from all the 3 options, grab the second one, and it should say it's St. Kitts, right? And click on it. And so it did, right? So it did before and after, right? So before it highlighted it from the drop down, and after it's done it, right? It's done it. So that's it, right? That's it. But there's one thing here which this is not good enough. The code is not good enough because it is not see, we didn't close our click, right? And it looks like Cypress did not mind about that. So we're just running through that again. Now we found an error. Let's go back and see what we have done wrong. So it says, right, it did find it. Have introduced something. This is it down here. What is this? This is it down here. Why do I have it right down there? So I put an additional one. So Cypress is not so foolish after all. Right, there was an additional one I did not see, right? So yeah, and that's it. Should pass again. Right, I was going to say this is not foolproof. This is not foolproof because we're using indexation, right? What happens if? Sorry, let's go to the website again. I will close this. What happens if these options change, right? I type SAI and St. Lucia now is no longer there, right? That drop down could change, right? And we've already said index the second, right? Now the second will be St. Vincent. So that script will fail. So there is also a way that you can, this is where dynamic drop-down selection really comes in, right? There is a way now that you can actually make this selection, right? Which is not, it's not hard coded, because this is what's called hard coded, right? It's not hard coded. Hard coded code is brittle and easily breaks if the UI changes, right? And if the options change. So next video we are going to do the second part to this, which would we'll go through a code that's more robust, and a code that's we implement another method. I will leave you to find out what the method is, right? And another method that would handle this dynamically, right? And each time it should, no matter what changes on the the um, the the drop down list or on the UI interface, it will still work, right? Because we're using a new method, right? Instead of the indexation, right? Indexation is hard coded. So you want to stay away from hard coding, right? So my name is Kevin Owasu Itoe. Stay blessed, and don't forget to subscribe. Hit the bell icon to receive the videos as I release them, and also like, thumbs up, comment. We are here to help each other out, and hopefully you got some value from here. My name is Kevin Owasu Itoe. Stay blessed.